Good afternoon to everybody. We are on Parshat MIshpatim, the Parsha that speaks about justice after Parshat Yitro when we speak about Matan Torah. So we start off with the famous words, Veda MIshpatim. The word, the letter V means and these are the Mishpatim. It's a continuation of the great event of Matan Torah. And the Torah now tells us that the Shekhinah is not only about something dramatic, surreal, but we have to bring the Shekhinah to our everyday lives, even in areas where there are damages, where there are injuries, where there are people who are trying to hurt. One has to make some sort of seder that these things don't happen. One of these laws, amongst the many laws of justice, the Torah tells us, Acharei Rabim Lahatot. Acharei Rabim Lahatot means that we should always decide matters according to the majority. Notice the verb that is written that says the word Lahatot. Lahatot means to tilt. Is in other words, what it is trying to say is that sometimes the majority that's what we have to follow. We lean and we tilt towards the majority opinion. It doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that that's the conduct that we have to do. Statistically, that's many times how it is, but not necessarily so. If we've got 10 doctors, average doctors who say A and 2 experts who say B, it doesn't mean that the 10 necessarily are correct, because the one they don't necessarily match up in expertise. But that's what the Torah is trying to tell us, that Acharei Rabim Lahatot, that we have to tilt all matters according to the majority. And that's why in democracy, I'm not speaking about a democracy which is like a tyranny, and when people misuse the democracy, but like a normal democracy, the Torah says that, we have to go according to the majority. And the Rosh says, this is something that doesn't only apply to, let's say, the judges when there's a Beit Din of 3 and 2 say one opinion, one say another. You have to follow the majority, but it's a general rule in the law of the land, as I said, gave an example of democracy. But of course, having said all of that, so it's very obvious, that's what we just wanted to explain, is the limitation of this rule. Because in the first part of that pasuk, which says that you always have to follow the majority, it says, Lo tiyeh acharei rabim l'ra'ot. It says that you're not allowed to follow the majority to do evil. In other words, what the Torah is saying very simply is where we're not sure exactly where things are standing, where there's a safek, where there's a matter of doubt, we're not exactly sure. So then what we have to do is we have to follow the majority. But when it's clear, it's broad daylight, that something is evil, something is wicked, so then it says, Lord, that we're not allowed to go after the majority. The classical case of that is mentioned in the Gemara, is the case of, in the time of the Tanakh of Chizkiah, there was a question whether the kingdom of Judah should surrender to the Assyrian forces, to the king Sanherib, who had completely surrounded Yerushalayim, and to just surrender and give over Yerushalayim to the Assyrians. And then Yeshayahu appeared to Chizkiyahu, and he said to them, even though there was a person called Shebna, who was a great scholar, and he was he was a person who he betrayed the people. He and his followers, the majority, and they said that it's in Jewish interest that we can't fight Sanherib, and therefore what we have to do is we have to surrender and give over Yerushalayim to Sanherib. So Yeshayahu says that Kesher Rashaim Eino Min Haminyan. In other words, all the majority that of the wicked people who did constitute the majority opinion, Eino Min Haminyan, they're not counted at all in assessing how much is the people for the motion or against the motion. The idea is very clear, that as we're saying, that when a person is in a safek, when he's in a doubt, that's when he has to follow the law. When he's not in it, they're going to decide what's right and what's opinion, or they can decide what's right and what's wrong. But when it says Acharei Rabim L'ra'ot, So we're speaking about the Torah determines whether something is right and wrong. Then within the Torah, if we've got a safek, okay, so we go by the majority. But if the majority decide something on the basis of what? This is what they feel, this is what they like, etc., and it's not clear at all. So then you don't have to follow the majority. The majority, as has been explained. So that's, as I say, that's this golden rule of following the majority, which we accept in the halacha, and at the same time, there's this reservation that we have to be very careful that just because they're majority in certain areas, people say that this is what we should follow, so it doesn't mean that we have to follow it just because of popular opinion. Who determines what is right and wrong is ultimately the Torah. There's a famous story of Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz when he was a younger person. He was asked by the king in Prague. He was asked, why is it that the Jews don't follow the majority of the opinion, which are the Christians? After all, it says in the Torah, that you have to follow the majority, and the majority of the culture is not like that. And that's the answer that he gave. He said, like we're saying now, he says the majority is only that if we've got a safek. When you've got a doubt, then you go after the majority. But we haven't got a doubt about the veracity and the truth of Judaism. We haven't got any safek about the Kadosh Baruch Hu and the Torah and Yisrael. So in that case, Abadai, the majority doesn't hold. Mizat Hashem, that's what we should always have, the absolute conviction and of the truth. In that way, we won't be swayed, as in fact has been throughout history. The minority actually always happened to be right, and actually the majority 90% not right, and that's what this great principle tells us. Shabbat Shalom Lekulam.